Okay, guys, I think it's time to start up with that. Let's see if somebody else joins in, they can join in later. Okay, and as it is a recorded session, I will be uploading the video on YouTube and sharing it link on my profile and everybody in the email as well. So the question is, the topic of today is API development. So I want to tell you a little bit story about how did it all start. It all started about somewhere in 2008. I was running a business and I wanted an order tracking ability for my customers. That was back in 2008. And at that time, order tracking I was using mostly Joomla. That was similar to how you say that is WordPress. So it was a content management system. And there were a gazillion plugins and there were still plugins under development, but that very finish simple interface for customers to just track their orders, whatever shipped to them was not at my hold. And I was in my early stages of learning how to develop. So where I started is I started digging down into the aspect of how do things and how do these scriptings and the backend does work. And that is where I discovered what we call is API. And now it's called RESTful API, which is the backbone and the basis of everything that is going around in the world. Anything that needs to digitally transform needs to know how to adapt and run and absorb APIs. So API stands for Application Programmable Interface. There's always an abbreviation for anything. So let's make it more understandable the way I understand it to simplify the complexity in regards to that. Now, this is a use case I digged up recently, and there are two use cases I want to explain to you. TripAdvisor is a very well-known company, and this company has integrated an API system into their service. Meaning, there are other companies that allow you to search for hotel rooms, search for places, search for reviews and everything. Now, that whole thing is contained within the company. Now, what TripAdvisor did was when they integrated an open API platform into their own system, they had more than 700 partners creating 50,000 third-party apps and services, 300 million monthly uniques who see the brand on other sites. You can read in regards to about it. So what TripAdvisor became it became a giant by just integrating the API aspect of it. So it is giving access to other users very openly in a secure manner that you can take our data and use that data and build apps on top of that data that can serve you. So what TripAdvisor it became an ecosystem where other people were dependent on TripAdvisor. So let's suppose if somebody wanted to start something else, rather than they making their own TripAdvisor, they use TripAdvisor as their backbone, and then they developed everything on top of it. And once they developed everything on top of it, they were eventually dependent on TripAdvisor. And once they're dependent on TripAdvisor, so the success rate of TripAdvisor boomed up like a hockey stick. And the second use case that I want to tell you about is Fitbit. Fitbit only developed one app in-house. Everything else that you see is developed by people that are not part of the Fitbit company. They are people that are using the ecosystem of Fitbit to develop all the apps that utilize the technology and they expose the data, and then they apply very different sort of systems and algorithms through which they can find useful things that are good for us. So Fitbit does health monitoring. So with Fitbit's open API system, what you can do is you can expose that I want to get the data for this much time. So I can directly communicate using their Fitbit API into their Fitbit watches and their hardware as well. So once they expose their hardware, so I'm not going to go create my own Fitbit. I will be using Fitbit's hardware and I will be promoting Fitbit at the end of the day. But my app in the process is going to promote itself too. So let's move forward, and I just want to explain the aspect how things work in the database system, in this whole API system. So initially, the problem that I faced was, which I tried to solve when creating an API, was you have a database that has all your storage of all your records of your users, of your blog posts, your news posts, your anything in that respect. And you want the user to get access to the content that is on the database. So in the above diagram, the typical use case when somebody on the client end, on the user end, if they've got an app, whether it's a web app or a mobile app or a desktop app, you would have to give access to the database. That means you will be giving on the app end some credentials, secure credentials, a username, password that is going to be accessing the database. But the problem here is this is a security flaw, because if the user's app is on the user phone, he can easily get hold of that user's credentials, the database credentials that are the username and the password. And if he gets hold of that, what's going to happen? Your website's going to be hacked. Everything's going to be hacked. He's going to be doing haywire stuff on your database. So to solve such a dilemma, what happens is a backend server comes in between the whole transactional process, where let's suppose he requests all his profile information from the database. So the backend server authenticates the user and only serves him what he wants and his credentials. He doesn't give him access to the complete database. So the credentials are stored on the backend API server. So this is where what happens is the user sends a request to the server initiates a connection with the database using the credentials, and then the transaction takes the data, comes back to the server, and the server organizes and sorts the data and sends it back to the user. So this is purely what API is. So in case of TripAdvisor and Fitbit, what is happening is the hardware and the database, it is connected to the backend API. So when you establish, when a third person establishes a connection with the server to request for some hardware data or some stored data, they communicate with the backend API, and the server authenticates the hardware and the database and serves the data, formats it the way the user wants it in a very secure manner. So today's task, I hope I'm able to achieve it, is set up an environment, install the tools, install Node.js, JavaScript basic, understand the JSON concept, and write a user authentication API. So this is what we're going to try to accomplish in the next hour. So going forward with that, I just want to ask how many of you are on Windows and how many of you are on Mac OS? Because there's slightly a different angle to which you set up the environment, but once the environment is set up, everything end forward is actually the same. So if you can write on the chat screen that whether you're on Windows or Mac. Now to get all that thing done and set up, what I used is I've set up this virtual box that's gonna have Windows running in my Mac. So I'll be setting up everything one step at a time, port by port. And as this is a recorded session, I would really love you that if you could follow up this tutorials in regards, but you can follow up that at the end of the course as well, end of the session. And I will also share the files on GitHub that you can use and rerun on your angle. So this is a clean vanilla Windows version. It has nothing installed in it. So the first thing we want to install in the environment is there are two types of systems that are going by. One is the Windows shell system, and the other one is the Windows subsystem for Linux. So what happened was, as time went by, Windows was a competitor, a contender for Linux, because there was a big competition. But it soon realized that without Linux, servers cannot function. So what Windows did is the Windows 10 version that you have got, it has a layer beneath it, which gives you a complete native access to the Windows subsystem for Linux. That means you're running Windows, and at the same time, you have access to Ubuntu as a Linux shell as well. Now, how do you enable that in that angle? So you go to Start, you go to Microsoft Store, and then you search for Ubuntu. Now, as you can see, you'll have quite a different flavor of Linux is available officially on the Microsoft Store. And this is free to download, so you don't need to worry about it. You can click on any version. I usually prefer with the Ubuntu 20.04. LTS stands for long-term support. And once you install it, which is in my case, it's already installed. Okay, you will have a Ubuntu icon in it. Now, sometimes what happens is by default, this is an optional feature in Windows. It does not get enabled in that. So I just took a screenshot of when you open the Windows shell, the Ubuntu shell, by going to Start and Ubuntu. For me, it shows up a shell. But if you are shown a screen that the Windows subsystem for Linux optional component is not enabled, please enable it and try again. What you can simply do is go to Start, Run, and type in optional features, just optional features. And when you click on OK, it gives you this dialog. And when you scroll down, you will see that this would be usually unchecked. You gotta check this box, click OK. It's gonna do a system restart, and then you will be available with this shell aspect in that. So what we are doing is rather than installing Linux as a second operating system, Windows has given us the ability to use Linux within Windows. And why do we use Linux within Windows? Because the environment is much more stable and the tools are designed for Linux specifically. So every time the tool changes, Windows has to set up a specific environment through which it has to give you access to the tools. And it is very buggy in that angle. So let me pull up this thing. Okay. Now, the first thing that we want to install in this angle is we want to install Node.js. So what is Node.js? JavaScript was used as a front-end framework. It was used as on the user client's end. So usually what you had was, or the backend server, you either had PHP as a language or Python as a language. So to make this discrepancy sort out, what JavaScript did was they developed a framework that was called Node.js, which allows you to use JavaScript as a backend server. So how do you do that? Now, there are two methods. First, you can go to officially their nodejs.com website. Let me open it up over here. And you can use this utility that will download whatever version you want. The latest version is 16.40. But I want to show you another method because this is going to change your Windows environment, and it will give you access to the Node.js framework, but it might not give you access to, in a detailed manner the way we want it on the shell, because that way it's much more easier. So I want you to introduce to a tool called Homebrew. Now, what is Homebrew? Homebrew is a package manager that helps you and assists you in installing anything in a single command line based. Now, why do we use Homebrew? We use Homebrew because when these frameworks are installed, they change your environment, your operating system, in a manner that sometimes when you want to install another application or another framework, it might collide with each other and it would change its environment. And once it changes its environment, then you get all sorts of these errors where the library is not available, or it's outdated, or the versions do not match. So what happens is Homebrew, first of all, makes the setting up of your environment much more easier. And then secondly, it makes sure that not one application framework does not conflict with the other application framework. So as I showed you that we have a terminal over here, and this is a clean Windows installation. So I go to Brew website, I copy this link over here, and then I simply I have to open it up over here to copy it. Yep, it's working right now. So I just copy this command line right over here, and it's going to ask you for a password. The first time when you install, when you run Ubuntu, it's going to ask you to create a username and then give it a password. When you type over here, you're not going to see any password that's typing by, and but still the password is going by. And when you press enter, it's going to start installing the Homebrew framework that will allow you to install apps. So using Homebrew, we will be installing Node.js. Now, as we go by, you can also browse this website where this search box can be used to search for packages that are available in Brew. And Homebrew has gazillion packages, from AWS CLIs to anything that you can think of that is required as a library or anything. It is available on Homebrew. So we're going to search for Node, and there we see that we've got different versions of Node and other packages that are available. So this is the simple command that is going to install Node.js on your operating system and give you access to the complete API system. In the meantime, as it installs, do you guys have any questions or anything that you want to ask in the meantime?
I must say that if anyone has any question, simply you can raise hand and we can take the question. In the meantime, I guess if you have any important thing, you can just type in the chat as well.
Okay, as this installs, we also need a editor in which we're going to be writing our code. I was initially using back in the times Notepad++, and an editor is an integrated, it's kind of an integrated development environment that helps you assist in typing and organizing the code as well. So what I use, you can use it of your own choice, but there are editors like Atom and Visual Studio Code. So I personally prefer Visual Studio Code. So let's download it and install that as well. The Visual Studio Code installation process is pretty much simple. You just download the package from the official website and just get on with the installer by clicking next, next, next. Okay, this VirtualBox is getting a bit slow, but that's fine. Let's move forward. And we have Visual Studio Code and the Node.js application package manager is still installing. So we'll let it install. In the meantime, I just like to do a couple of things with the Visual Studio that makes it much more acceptable. The first thing it wants is for us to install the Windows subsystem WSL install on your system. It has automatically detected, so we install that. That is an extension that assists in opening files in Linux format based. And the second thing I want to do is I want to change the color theme to light plus. Okay, we have now Node.js, and it wants us to do a couple of things, as you can see right over here. Oh, this is, we have Homebrew. So the next steps that it expresses is add Homebrew to your path. Now, what is a path? Every time the shell loads, every time this shell is this command line interface that gives you access to the operating system and the libraries by using commands in the command line. Now, the path is the location of the library that you are calling. Let's say you have made a shortcut on your desktop, and that shortcut, for example, this Visual Studio Code shortcut. If you right click on it, it has two things. One, it has an icon, which you can change over here. And the second is the path, the target location. This is the file that we want to run from this shortcut. So we don't have to go to this PC, see program files, and then it is in program files. Yes, it is in local programs. It is in a different location that it installs. So we don't have to manually go to Visual Studio Code folder and run it. So that's how the environment in Linux requires the location of all the application frameworks that you want to use as command lines and install in regards to that. So how do you set those paths? Is there is a .profile file. .profile is a hidden file. You just have to copy paste this line, and it is going to add the path. As you see, I selected it, and then I pressed right click. It hid the selection box. This is where it copies it, and then I right click again, it pastes it right over there. So now it is exactly over there. This is the build essentials. We require this for every time we want to compile a program, and then we've got GCC, that is a C++ compiler. That is for the core, because all JavaScript and Node.js in the core compiles at that language. So we will just go with this. And this is a 189 update. This is going to come by. I should have done it before, but that's fine. Let it install. Coming back to the visual editor. This is the Explorer box, and this is the extensions box. The extension box gives you the add-ons that are available for Visual Studio Code that you can install, and that will assist you in the process. So the two add-ons that I want is Notepad++ key map. As coming from a Notepad++, this embeds all the shortcuts that I've been using in Notepad++ into Visual Studio Code. And the second is icons. If I create a folder and drag it over here, it will just show me the files with standard icons. But with this library and pack, every file, when it's a JS or an HTML file, will have its own unique icon. So it's much more easier for me to differentiate from what file I want to open and what file I want to keep organized. This opens up a box, and then you click on this, and it sets the default library as VS Code great icon right over there. Okay, so now in the command line, if we type in brew, it will be not found because you need to restart this shell. And for that to happen, you need to close it and run it once more. Now, when I type in brew, this will give me the help file for brew, which means it's completely installed. So to recap whatever we've done, the first thing what we've done is we've used Microsoft Store to install Ubuntu as our embedded operating system in Linux, because we will be doing all the development on Linux as a backend shell. Then the second thing what we did was we set up the shell and we installed Homebrew, which is available at brew.sh. And what is Homebrew? Homebrew is a package manager, but allows you the ease and assists you in installing all the application frameworks that are available online and that we require. And once we install Homebrew, we are available with this command line, which is available in the start Ubuntu menu, and which gives us Linux access while we are in Windows, and we don't have to install Linux as a second operating system to do this. So moving forward, we went to Homebrew website. Now we just need to install Node.js. So we search for the package, we copied it. It is not pasting from the clipboard. We just type it. Now, if I may ask for the audience, I just want to test the water over here. What do you understand about APIs so far? Who's going to answer that?
Can you say again, please?
I just wanted to ask, so far, what have you understood about APIs so far?
Well, in my case, API is a kind of a certain service that clients get from the server side. I don't know. This is the answer. Well,
it's perfect.
I don't know.
It's perfect. You know, it's just that it's just a refresher. So once you're able to define anything in English as a language, you're able to better grasp the concept of it. And that is, I just wanted to verify in regards to that my speed of things that I'm going is quite right over there. And are you having any issues with understanding how I'm setting up the environment, whether it's fast or whether it's slow?
Oh no, it's fine. Just on the Windows, well, you said that need to change the Ubuntu command line, right?
Yes.
And got some errors, and changed some settings, but had to restart the OS. So
you have to restart the OS.
Yeah.
Once you enable that Windows subsystem for Linux.
Yes.
Yes, Avas, you are right that everything in itself is an application and it is able to talk with each other. And there's another word that I want to add to the dictionary. It's called an abstraction layer. The example for it is when you have a radio that or an iPod that plays some songs, how do you control the iPod? You control it. Yes, Ms. Sana, you have a question?
API is an interface where different applications can interact.
Yes, exactly. So to understand it in a much more applicable use case that everybody uses an iPhone or an iPod and other interfaces like MP3 players and everything. So what happens is when you play the button, the logo on the play button, whether it's a software or a hardware, you know what happens? It plays. Okay, the song plays. Now, how does it play it? How does it store the file? How does it accesses the file? That is an abstraction layer, and you don't need to go into that. You just press the play button and then it starts playing it. So I'll just give you an example. When you're programming an application, you make a button, you drag and drop a button, and then the button exposes an API which says an on-click listener. You have an abstraction layer and you don't have to worry about that how the button is pressed, how the button is depressed, how is the UI changing of the button with the shadow and everything, the animation in regards to it. You just know that the on-click listener for the button is called when you press that button, and then you write your own code. So the API has been there in every aspect of every application development, from hardware to anything that's software. Even in our cars, a lot of people don't know how the car engine operates. What are the nitty-gritties? How is fuel transformed over there? What is the burning method, and so on and so forth. So that is an abstraction layer. When you're driving a car, you're given an API by the manufacturer, and that is the steering, the accelerator, the brake in manual, the clutch, and the gearbox system, and the handbrake. So all these interfaces are API interfaces. And this is what we're developing over here. So you have an abstraction layer and you can reuse or utilize that abstraction layer to get your work done. And everything from generating SMSs online, from communicating with the video audio platforms online, everything is done through API at this current point of time. And that is why people who have a deeper sense and a concept of API are far much more easier to develop successful applications or other aspects of things than people who just don't have a context of how the abstraction layer works. So as we see, our build tools is ready, and now we are going to install Node. I think we installed Node in that. And if you use the up arrow, it's going to show the last command that's there. So now if I say node dash version, it will give me the version 16.4.0. So this means that Node is installed on our system. Okay. So now what we're going to be doing is we are going to be creating a project, and in that project, we will go through the basics of JavaScript that we require, and we will set up in a very quick mode the first API that we will be using to bring in data. So we can go to the desktop. We are already at the desktop. Yep. Let's close it. Start it once more. Okay. I have just used mkdir as a command to make my directory over there. And now I'm going to type in code dot. So what does code dot do? Whenever you type code dot in any folder while you're in the Ubuntu terminal, it opens that folder in VS Code. So this is a shortcut for opening anything in VS Code. You allow this access because this is a kind of like a network interface through which it's accessing. And yes, I trust the author in regards to it. Coming back, I will create a JavaScript file. Touch is a command that used to create an empty file. I'm going to call it app.js. And if I come back to the Visual Studio Code project, I can see my app.js is available. So for the first command that we want to write in JavaScript, it is called console.log. hello world. Now, what is console? This thing right over here in our terminal, that is going to be the console. And we are using an API exposed by the console application written in JavaScript, which is called log, to print out a message which is called hello world. So how do I run it? While in the application, I'm going to type in node app.js. That's it. We have hello world. So this is our first application, and we have successfully run console.log and printed something on the console application, the console log right over there. So moving forward, what I want to do is I want to initialize the project. So it allows me to install other packages that help me set up a server, a backend server, and I don't have to create the server from scratch. So for that, what we use is like we use Brew as a package manager that helps you assist in installing application frameworks. Node has a website which has a list of contributors that present their JavaScript packages that everybody can use. And the utility that Node comes up with is called a Node package manager. So if you type in npm-version, it will spew out what version of npm is. So npm stands for Node package manager. So the package that we are interested right now to use is called Express.js. Now, what is Express.js? Express.js is a small web server that allows any person to not worry about how web servers work and yet utilize the functionality of the web server by exposing their own API. Now, how to find Express? So this is the website where all the packages are, and there are gazillions of packages, which I highly recommend that everybody should explore, because it opens up a lot of potential for whatever you can do in regards to that. I'm going to type in Express. And this is the Express package. Express has also its official website. On the right-hand side, you can see its weekly downloads. There are approximately 16,000 downloads in regards to right now. And the version that's going by is 4.71. Total unpacked size is 200 kilobytes. So in 200 kilobytes, you have a web server running. Now, how do you install it? To install it, we just simply copy and paste this command right over there into our project. The clipboard is not working, so I will just type it on. Now, as you see, once I typed in npmi, npmi stands for install. The Node package manager install Express. It created this folder node_module, and it created a package.json file. So the package.json file is a file which keeps tracks on what libraries your project has and what libraries that your project do not need. So if I remove this statement right over here, it's going to remove, next time I run node npm install, it's going to remove that package. So what you can do is you can create a list of packages right over here and type in npmi, and it's going to automatically install that. And where did it install all the files? It installed into this. So this Express is dependent on all these different sort of packages. So it's not one package. It is again using an API of other providers and combining them into one application and creating a new application out of it. So we can do the same thing. We can use a set of applications and combine it and create a new functionality out of it. So let's go back to app.js. Now, what we are going to be doing is over here highlighting the basic functionalities of JavaScript. I highly recommend that you go to Work W3 School. Based on the time constraint, I just want to show you the functionality in regards to it. This is commenting the code, and now I want to import the Node, the Express library into our applications, into our application right over here, and I want to use it as a function. So how do I do that? I create a constant variable by the name of Express. And then I use this command, which is require, brackets open, close. And in between, I type in Express. That's it. This is the simple way to import any library. So whatever the library name is, you use the require command and type in the library name in it. That's how you import the library into Node.js. Then what I want to do is the way, and all these commands can be found. This is not something that is hidden. If you go to the website, Express.js, there is a guide, and look at this API reference. All applications have an API reference to it. So a guide gives you the basics, getting started, installing Hello World. Through this, you can go to the documentation and learn how to use any library that is out there. So moving forward, you can go to the documentation. I'm going to start up with we have to create another variable and initialize the application by typing in express brackets open close. And then we need to know a port. A port is like a gate through which server listens to it. Think of it a house. If you want to enter a house, it needs a door. So for someone to access this application, it needs a door. So whatever port is, that is the door of your application. And the web server on the internet uses an AT port. So all ports are specifically organized in a manner that they have been standardized to be using for specific purposes. So AT is used for the website standard port. 443 is used for SSL ports, and 21 is used for file transfer protocol port. Okay, now there are two concepts right over here that have been a standard for the APIs to communicate with each other. The first is known as GET, and the second is known as POST. Now, what is GET and what is POST? It is a method through which the APIs communicate with each other. The special thing about GET and POST is that GET sends in data which is unencrypted. And POST sends in data which is encrypted. So a very simple use case is when you get a password reset email in your inbox, what happens is when you click on it, there's usually a very long link on top of it. So what the long link is doing is it is sending all the variables, your code, your email address in that URL link. But when you want to log into a website, you do not want to send your username and password on top of the link. So at that point, the URL encrypts the data and does not send it in the URL as a whole. So it sends it into a body of the URL. That is where the GET and POST is. We can get into further detail about the discussion, but I want right over here to set up something very bare bone and get it up and running. So we can go up with an example about it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a GET API. So I'm going to call this app right over here. An app has an API exposed like a function, which is called GET. And the two things that it requires is first, the URL, and then the callback function. Now the callback function is when this function runs or execute, it sends the data from that executed process into that callback function. So how do you write a callback function? Just type in function. You type in the variables, response and request and response. And that is how the callback function is written. So it is simply a function. We don't have to specify a name because the name is not required over there, but which has two variables that we send into the function. This is request and response. Basics of JavaScript. We can go into detail, but I just want to get something up and running. So our URL is going to be my first API. And what are we going to do is in this response, I'm going to send hello world. Now at this time, there's one more thing we need to mention over here. We need this application to listen for a port. We do it by typing app.listen, and we specify the port right over here. And then we again send a callback function. And when this thing runs, it's going to type in the console that it is listening to server at port. Now we're going to run this application by typing in node app. And what does it say? This is a spell mistake right over here. It's require. This opens Windows Defender has blocked some features of this app because it's giving access to a port over there. And as I click allow, the server is listening to port 3000. Now, how do I test it? I open Chrome. I type in localhost, which is my local computer, and I type in 3000. And our URL that specifies / my first API. Now, this is how we have successfully written our first API. And we can v2 test. We'd have to restart the server. Control C kills the server. Node app.js restarts the server. This is how you make URLs in API development. Any questions so far? You can type it, and or you can just unmute the mic and say it. Still fine to understand. Okay, that's fine. Let's go back and just write in a post API. And this time what we want to do is we want to get some variables. We want to send it something, process it, and get it back. So there's an application that is used in testing this API. It's called Postman. This is an API testing tool.
I have a certain questions.
Yes.
Well, you said that the post is related to the encrypted, right?
Yes. Yes.
And is there any difference between the encapsulations and encrypted?
Could you repeat the question? Encryption.
Well,
yeah.
Encapsulation.
Encapsulation.
Yes. I'm always confused.
How do you want to kind of understand encapsulations in that regard? Let's say, for example, for this code right over there. Because when there's encapsulation, you are binding data variables with that function in regards to that. So for example, the callback function right over there is encapsulating these two variables. Now, right now, what I'm going to be doing while writing the next API, we are going to be sending two variables that we are going to be processing from the front end right over here. Probably like a calculator. So I'm going to send him A and B, and it's going to add up A and B, and then respond me back with C, the added values. So for that, I'm installing Postman. And I think that would justify the concept of encapsulation for you, that how variables are sent and how variables are received and how they're processed, right? We have Postman installed. I am going to run this application right now over here. Our server is still running at 43,000. You can sign in. It keeps record of your APIs, or you can skip in regards to that. So this is the interface of how Postman works. This is the collection of all your URLs that you are be using, and this becomes an overview pad. I just close this down, minimize it, and let's first test our API right over here in Postman. So our URL is my first API v2/test. There are other types of request methods as well, but right now we're going to understand get and post, and then we can go away with other methods as well. We have an error right over here.
You have a typo.
Yep, I think so. It's the typo. My first API v2 test.
FIL.
Oh yeah, got it right over there. No, we don't have a typo. We didn't restart the server.
You missed the API. Did
Okay.
type.
My first API v2 test. Yep, sorry. Thank you. Okay. So as we can see, this tool also this tool is used for testing the APIs in regards to that. Now we're sending a simple plain message right over here. What I want to do is replace it with the JSON response. So what is JSON? JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it is the standard way in which all APIs communicate with you. How does a JSON looks like? It has a curly braces, and then you type in the variable. It's called key value pairs. Value 1 is 1, 21, and success is equal to true. So it handles Boolean values, integers, and strings as well. Now we need to restart the server. We send in the same request. Now we have a JSON response. And this is the standard at which everything around the world is communicating in regards to it. Now, how do we send variables from our front end and then process the variables in our application and send it back? We need a library, which is called body parser, which acts as a basis for us to process the variables that are in the URL. Now, how do we install that? Let me just open up the website for that. npm install body parser. Okay, this package has been installed, and we call this constant body parser. We call this library right into our application, and then we want our app to use body parser as the basis of. So what does body parser do? Body parser, what it does is when we send encrypted data into the URL, it processes that data and extracts the variables in a way that it is far more easier for us to utilize it into our application. And how we do that? We make the Express app app.use body parser.json, and then we give it a limit of ended. So now we have body parser in it. Now, how do we listen to variables? First, we got to set up a URL in which we're going to be sending a variable. So the URL that we're going to be setting up is going to be localhost 3000 calculate. And in the body of that URL, in an URL encoded, we're going to be sending A, value is 10, B, value is 20. Our URL is set up, and now we need to call this URL right over here. App.post, calculate. This is done, and we create a variable known as data, and then we type in that whatever request from this call function is available over here. We want the body of that request. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to just type a console log the data and send a response to send value received. Now let's restart our server and see if our values are available in our console or not. There is very little real estate right over here for me to work out. Okay. Can anybody tell me why did we got this error request right over here? Because I just sent it as a GET request. This should be a POST request right over here. And now we can see we got the value received. And in the console, we got the values as JSON. So this is what the body parser does. Okay. Owen, is that cool? Is it fine? Anything that you think is complicated, and Awais, you also, anything that you think that is kind of way complicated or is too fast? Okay, let's process these values. How do we get it over here and send it as a JSON response like a calculator? What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable C, data.a, and because this is being received as a string, we need to parse it as an integer plus. And now we've got the calculated value, and I'm going to send it as a JSON value, response.json. Value as C. Now, if I restart this application and then send this request again, Now, as you can see that we have built a small calculator API, which whatever value we send it, it calculates it and it sends us back. We got a value of 15. Okay. So this is the backend code. And I think these were the basics of just knowing how very simple API kind of works out in regards to that. Any questions or anything? And we're almost out of time as well. I think we should close the meeting, and I will try to upload and skim through the video and share it with you. Okay, Owen, thank you for your time. Okay, Wes, thank you for your time. If you've got any questions, just post me on LinkedIn. Bye-bye.